Today's episode is brought to you by Media for All, which was set up to help encourage more Black, Asian, and other ethnic talent into media, and to provide a support and mentoring network to ensure talent flourishes in the media industry that we all love. If you're looking for a mentor or would like to mentor young ethnic talent, check them out at mediaforall.org.uk, and it is all 100% free.
Hello and welcome to the Shiny New Object podcast. My name is Tom Ollerton. I'm the founder of Automated Creative, and this is a podcast about the future of marketing. Every week or so, I have the pleasure and the privilege of interviewing one of our industry's leaders, and this week is no different. I'm on a call with Riley Dunn, who is brand manager at the Dove brand at Unilever. Riley, thanks so much for dialing in today. Could you give the audience a bit of an overview of who you are and what you do?
No, my pleasure. Sure. So I'm Riley Dunn. I'm a brand marketer. I'm motivated by making products and experiences for a better future, and I currently get to apply that to my role at Unilever with the Dove brand. Specifically, I work on the Dove Men+Care brand. So that's all of our, shower products, shower gels, body washes, bar soaps, catered to men. And my team, we craft all of the new product innovation from the formulation, the fragrance, the pack design, as well as the brand strategy and the campaigns and content that then go and support those products across different geographies around the world. So imagine a lot of wordsmithing briefs to creative agencies, anything from pack design to our latest commercials. I've been on that team for some time, through a few work levels, but I really kind of have this men's grooming expertise because previous to that, I worked on our Axe business. In the UK, you'll know it as Lynx. And so that was kind of within our deodorants category, but I worked across different categories. And that's really what's maybe most unique about my experience is that though it's all been with Unilever, I've done a variety of functions through sales and now marketing, different categories. And it really feels as if I've maybe worked for 3 or 4 different companies in the past, 8 or 9 years, which is unique. It's varied, but it's also uniform in that way.
And so it's interesting to hear your Unilever experience described as 3 different businesses. So I'm curious to know, in those different experiences, those 3 sort of different businesses within Unilever, what has been your biggest screw up, that facepalm moment where you were all red-faced and embarrassed and ashamed, but actually it was been the making of you?
Sure. So there's, I'm going to share with you a time that I found myself quite embarrassed in front of hundreds of consumers, my brand leadership, and also one John Legend. And there's kind of like a famous quote that sums it up really nicely. And then it's, it's not the mountain ahead, but it's the pebble in your shoe that might wear you out. And this is, one of those instances where it's really the small things that got us. And I find the marketeers tend to do this, right? We focus on that shiny new object. We focus on the fun over the fundamentals. And we certainly did on this occasion. So to set the context, it's 2016 and we are busy relaunching the Axe brand in the United States. Like in the UK, Lynx, it's alter ego in the UK. It's all about attraction. It's all about confidence. And our plan to debut this new approach to confidence and attraction was this campaign called Find Your Magic. And as a part of that campaign, we were taking John Legend, who is, obviously, hugely famous, multi-talented singer, songwriter, TV personality, actor. And we were having him mentor these rising musicians and filmmakers ahead of live activations at South by Southwest and then later the Toronto Film Festival. And it was really cool because our shiny new object at the time was taking these live events and leveraging Periscope, which was kind of like one of those early live streaming platforms acquired later by Twitter, to stream these events and put paid media behind them and kind of push that out to guys on the Twitterverse. So, you can imagine it's not only a couple hundreds of consumers in the crowd there watching these 5 films by these up and coming filmmakers, but it's also being like live streamed in real time onto Twitter. So a lot of eyeballs for sure. And, everybody's focused on John. John's in the kind of PR bullpen. We got the top editors from the top, spaces that we want to put his for guys across the US, whether it's GQ or Men's Health. We have him mentoring these young filmmakers, getting like their 1 hour mentorship session backstage, and everybody's kind of focused there, and I certainly was, right? I wanted the picture, I wanted the handshake, I wanted to crack a joke. he was kind of like the man of the hour at Toronto Film Festival because it was the premiere of La La Land where he kind of debuted his acting. So we're all focused there, right? And we file into the theater. It's a prominent theater in Toronto, and we're about 2 minutes into the first film whenever I realized that there's this sound, and I'm no AV expert, but there's this like live wire low hum in the background of the soundscape that's just, it's not a part of the film. And, we quickly had to pivot, cut the film, go to the theater, fix the issue, troubleshoot, and get it up and running. But I mean, can you imagine me in the front row? And I don't know why, but the first person I looked at was John, right? There's this like obvious issue with the film that we're debuting in front of hundreds of consumers. And, I'm the brand manager. I wouldn't probably have conducted the sound check myself, but I'm certainly the one that kind of approves the run of show. And I'm the one that will take credit for not having a sound check. So that's a long way to say that since then, since that fuck up, I've certainly focused on the fundamentals. I measure twice, I cut once, and I make sure that the foundation of whatever we do is in a really good spot before we go and try to do that really cool thing and to add on to it. And that's kind of been a defining point in my career. I mean, sometimes I'll admit the core of the core, the business fundamentals aren't the most fun thing to worry about. But if you focus there, your floor certainly rises, right? And then you can do the cool thing on top of that, the shiny new object.
I had the unusual experience of seeing Keith Weed, obviously your ex-CMO, speak at an event I was running, it's like 5-6 years ago, and he sent his slides ahead of time, which had some videos in it, and he sent his team down to do the sound check or slide check, I guess, whatever you call it. And his team went through every single slide, and they were like, "No, that font needs to change, or that's rendered incorrectly. Can you change that?" In the loveliest way, absolutely lovely team. And then we got to the end of the deck, and we're like, "Oh my god, that took ages." And then they're like, "Right, we're doing it again." I was like, "Again? Are you kidding me?" Like I'd never seen so much effort put into it, and we went all the way through it again. And then when he was on stage, like he would click through his slides, but he never looked at them. He just knew what was going on, and we didn't even have monitors in the background. He just knew what it was, and so he would sort of kick off all these moody like videos about consumers having a great time probably, and it was beautiful. It was just so well done because he had, as you say, he measured twice or measured 5 times I think, and then
Sure.
cut. And
Sure.
so I can absolutely, having had a career in performance for different amateur levels, there's nothing worse than something like that going wrong. So that's a great story, and a nice one to pass along. So other than measuring twice and cutting once, what other advice do you have that you would give to a smart, young, driven student who's doing all the right things?
Yeah, and it's harder than ever, truly, because I think even when I was coming into Unilever, there was still that opportunity to network properly and get in the face of people that were making decisions about placing talent. And I feel like today it's increasingly relying on AI, right, for people to record videos of themselves and to go through the motions about like, okay, what's your stump speech as a person? What's your personal brand? What are you passionate about? What are your experiences? What are your role in the collegiate community or at your university? And so more than anything, I think it's important for students to find out and do some recon on what language is important at that organization or the firm that they're reaching out to, because I think if you try to like hack the AI, you can guarantee that the human inputs to that process are largely contingent about, okay, who's talking about sustainability the most, or personal purpose, or whatever it may be. And secondarily, I think find out which student groups your target firm is recruiting from. I came from a non-target university myself, and the only way that I made my foot through the door at Unilever was I had an in that helped me understand, okay, they recruit heavily from this student organization called SIFE. It's now called Enactus in the US and globally. And so join your local SIFE organization, or now Enactus organization, and you'll be able to then socialize with these recruiters and with these judges that these firms may bring on to the local competitions of whatever student group competitions there are. So do that recon, do that investigation, and then join those groups yesterday and have a prominent role in those student groups, because I think that certainly helps. There's a last thing that I've only recently found out, and I wish I had found it out sooner. I think that our university students, college graduates who are coming out, maybe have a biggest opportunity here. And it's define early on what your personal branding is. Because I think if you can't brand yourself, like why would an organization trust you to brand their products and to market their products? And this can be highly visual. This can be, value-based things that you develop and stick to throughout your career, because I think that's how you, again, just like any branding exercise, that consistency is what, brings value to the table and helps people understand what you're about. And adopt early these platforms that give you a voice, whether it's podcasts or, you become a moderator in a clubhouse room or whatever it is, develop your personal brand and then leverage these platforms that give accessibility and for free to whoever it is, without that kind of like gatekeeping process. So go to these channels, develop your personal brand, and use that personal brand on these channels, because more and more, I think we're going to find that application processes are going to be much beyond the resume, right? They're going to be looking for your link to, your personal portfolio, or a link to other work that you do, whether it be like copywriting examples or content examples. And, it's tough to do that without a brand and without a day job. You can do that on your own for your personal brand. And I think that a lot more students should lean on that.
I agree with that, but it's much easier for an extrovert to do that. What would your advice be for someone who would rather stick needles in their eyes than sort of start talking about themselves, like even on LinkedIn, or the idea of tweeting about something might be terrifying to them, or being on TikTok or Clubhouse or whatever it is? Like, how do you do personal branding for someone who doesn't want to shout about themselves, and how do those people get heard above the chest beating type A characters who love that stuff?
I think it's a great point, and something that we probably have to reckon in our industry, along with other things in terms of equity. But for sure, we are an industry hell bent on associating people who are more flamboyant or more out there with creatives. And I'm learning more and more with my career that the most silent person in the room is often the one that I need to be listening to the most, because they really are sure-footed with whatever they say. That becomes a challenge whenever you're trying to your point, toot your own horn. My advice is only like get comfortable being uncomfortable, because I don't foresee that changing a lot within the marketing industry, especially whenever you don't have a forum necessarily within your own job currently. If you're looking for a job, you don't have a forum where you can be relied on as an expert for much. So lean on the venues of creativity that I think don't demand that you're in front of a camera, hot take, live, because if that makes you very uncomfortable, there's certainly still ways that you can get off your creative credentials, whether it be writing, whether it be copy, whether it be the design work that you do. Lean on those if that's the way that you are, choosing to establish yourself as a creative. Again, maybe not that pure like brand management marketeer, but more of a creative marketeer. I think there's certainly a role for someone who holds up, with an idea and develops it until it's ready for the world, and then kind of debuts it silently online to make waves.
So quick one before we move on to your shiny new object. What is that top marketing tip that you give most often that's stood you in good stead for your career so far?
I think the number one question I receive, and therefore maybe like the number one opportunity I have to bring advice to people, is in regards to education or continuing that learning process. Me myself, I did not choose to do an MBA, which for me made sense, but I understand that is still in some organizations still a little bit of a gatekeeping process. Oh yeah, we'd love an MBA for this marketing job or this brand manager job. I think that'll be done away with in due time. Until then, my only advice is to do your own MBA in a way. I think it doesn't require that you enroll in a top institution or an online MBA program for you to immerse yourself in like marketing academia, so that you can understand like who are the biggest voices, what are the latest clinical, and what are the latest studies and assertions that they're making about the marketing sphere, because more and more these high profile professors, they're required to make that content free to the public and to be advocates, and they're developing their own personal brand. So whether it's LinkedIn or Twitter, the Byron Sharps, the Mark Ritson, Scott Galloway's, Bennett and Fields, Tom Roach, like there's all these guys that I follow. I've read their books, some of them, but I really get these kind of like more bite-sized updates on like what is the latest in marketing effectiveness right in my LinkedIn feed or right in my Twitter feed. And that makes it just, that immersion in marketing academia, then I feel like gives me a nice rounding out on not having an MBA, because I can still talk that language. I still know that it's interesting to me as kind of like a heat check from time to time. Like, can I go read the latest on marketing effectiveness on channels? If so, then I know that I'm in it. And I feel like I don't need that MBA crest on my LinkedIn or, the printed credentials on my wall to really feel like that master. So my tip is to, if you're not going to do it formally, do it yourself, and to create that curriculum, stick to it and immerse yourself, because I think that's what's going to help you level up and not get complacent with, your current understanding of the marketing realm.
This episode of the Shiny New Object podcast is brought to you in partnership with MadFest. Whether it's live in London or streamed online to the global marketing community, you can always expect a distinctive and daring blend of fast-paced content, startup innovation pitches, and unconventional entertainment from MadFest events. You'll find me causing trouble on stage, recording live versions of this podcast, and sharing a beer with the nicest and most influential people in marketing. Check it out at www.madfestlondon.com. So we are at the halfway stage now, and we're going to talk about your shiny new object, which is an absolutely brand new one for the podcast. So thank you. And it is the case for paternity leave. Now, we interviewed Fiona Spooner, who's the, I think, CMO at the Financial Times, and she was talking about getting mums back to work. So I'm really keen to hear your views on paternity leave. But before we go into the detail, can you just give the audience a bit of a top line on why you think this is relevant and exciting for the future of marketing?
Sure. I think as marketers, what I'm most excited about is the idea that I've spent a lot of time, kind of like sharpening my sword and on shifting culture, right? And a lot of time I apply that to how do I make a consumer want my product because of its features and benefits, and how do I shift consumer habits so that they use a new product or more effective product or a more frequent product so that I can drive business results. And that for me was something I had to reckon, because I didn't feel like that was serving a personal purpose. And lately I've been really energized by this idea that really what I've been doing is I've been learning how to shift culture and shift consumer habits. And absolutely that's what marketing industry needs to do to the various issues that we have in our world, because the scientists can provide as much data and facts about whether it be climate change or gender equity or racial equity, but it's really the culture that needs to shift, and that can be done, I think, most effectively with people at the helm who know how to shift culture. So that's why I'm on a marketing podcast talking about something that probably should be, or has been previously reserved for, HR discussions and workplace benefit discussions, because I think as a marketer, it's our duty to help dedicate our services and give facility to these efforts. And there's a lot of data that I have that we can talk through that I think proves that as marketers, we maybe as any vertical, we can derive a lot of benefit from this time away. I think aside from the grand scheme of things and driving gender equity and allowing women to not be so burdened by childcare so that they can not step away from their careers, I think individually all of us can benefit from a time where we're really grounded in human nature, and babies are first, for me at least, they represent just that, as like a grounding in human nature, and also a time where I can kind of like pull off the gas a little bit and get creative, because I think aside from the childcare aspect, there is times where I'm able to maybe focus on the big picture, which I'm not afforded in my day by day. So that's why I'm here talking about paternity leave. I'm also currently on paternity leave, so as a credential, I can speak about my personal experience. I grew up in a home with a stay-at-home father, so I have that personal experience as well. And so I'm just really impassioned by the idea that this needs to be a new norm for us. And it's informed by policy. It's informed by whatever your country may provide to you, but it's also informed by the corporations, where we as marketers, we as industry people, I think, can make influence.
And so let's bring that back to work. So how do you think that your experience of paternity leave is going to make you a better employee?
For sure, I feel like I've been able to focus on what's most important. And more than ever before, and we talked about this maybe before the podcast, finding that balance is almost as hard as it's ever been before. But that balance is necessary, absolutely, so that I can, as a marketer, bring both sides of the brain function to work. I've always kind of relied on marketing as that balance of logic and magic. And I feel like more than anything, when you're in the swing of things, when you're, kind of like grinding against the deadlines, it's really tough to find that magic sometimes. I'm most energized by the idea that I'll be able to return to work and maybe bring a little bit more magic than I was before. Maybe bring a little bit more big picture, maybe bring a little bit more inspiration, and certainly bring a whole new center of gravity on what drives me to do good work for myself, for my family, and for the world. My whole viewpoint shifted about, the long game as soon as I looked into my son's eyes. And all of a sudden, it wasn't just about my 5-year plan, and it was about like, what kind of world am I creating for him in 2050? And all of a sudden, like everything I was doing, I felt so energized. Like, oh, we're not being long term enough. We need to go back to the drawing board on this product that we're creating in terms of sustainability, because that world that we're creating as marketeers, these are decisions that are being had by brand management, by especially in consumables, where we are creating the products that are at times the culprit in some of our sustainability issues.
Yeah, I agree. My daughter is slightly older than your recent arrival, and congratulations for that again. But it makes you realize who's going to pick up the check, right? Which is them. Like we can just throw something away and not really worry about it, or not recycle, or not do this or not do that. But ultimately, it's probably not going to affect us, but it will. Our kids pick up the check, right, and their kids as well. And it's interesting that you can really understand the impact of your actions as a marketer on that. And I was chatting to a soon to be the future guest of this podcast, who I can't name, but what he was saying was that, like, he used to be an activist. He used to be someone who wanted to have a career in pure activism, and whereas now what he does is work for a very large consumer confectionery brands, and he works on one of their biggest brands that has a kind of huge sustainability center to their brand and their purpose. And his view is, well, look, I can literally change the world by changing the way that this chocolate brand works, far more than I could if I was just an activist doing some kind of frontline stuff. And is that the way that you see it, or is it more nuanced than that?
No, that's exactly it. I feel entitled to making a change through the products that I use. I mean, especially if you think about, I have a huge opportunity. I work in body wash. It's 85% water shipped in plastic bottles, around the countryside into stores, or now as COVID has shifted the landscape more and more through e-commerce. And so, concentration of these items is something that I'm really focused on, and reducing our plastic waste, which we've done a really good job about at Unilever. Achieving 100% post-consumer recycled plastics, and even more lightweighting our plastics so that we are being less burdensome on the consumer. This is something that I take very seriously. And in addition to, the paycheck that I get, it's something that gives me a lot of energy and puts fuel in my tank, because again, the roles that we have, and it's maybe different in CPG, where you're kind of the center of the wheel. You're busy making sense of, what are the supply chain implications? What are the financial implications? You're making dollars make sense for things that maybe aren't as short-term value as they are long-term value, but you're creating the narrative, you're creating the story, and you're creating the consumer demand that makes these objectives a reality and helps manifest them in reality. Because I feel like you get a lot of people that say no, and it's really the marketers, I think, that have to push forward the agenda on bringing sustainability to the forefront, both in the consumer lens and helping consumers understand and desire it, but also on the P&L side, and making sure that the business case makes sense and that this is something that actually will drive competitiveness in the long term. So I take it to heart. I think it's absolutely, especially chocolate. I mean, that's one that's got a lot of issues. Coffee too, where you can make a big change in people in developing nations on the way that you source these items, and us the same on palm oil. So I take it very seriously, for sure.
So the one thing I'm struggling with your shiny new object is that a lot of the benefits to paternity leave, I think very touching, the way you're saying you want to have this a better world for your son, and that it helps you come from a different angle and helps you start thinking about like the impact of everything you do. But why is that specific to paternity leave? Wouldn't that just be a mindset that someone who doesn't have kids take on board? Like, what is it specifically about paternity leave that you think's different to just being conscious or aware or environmentally focused, for example?
Sure. I think it has to come down to gender equity, and really, it's counterintuitive in a lot of ways. And we see this as a brand. Dove Men+Care has spent a number of years first understanding the facts, and then communicating our brand purpose, which is championing men to have an expanded role of care for themselves and others, and paternity leave is a part of that. And so when we work with NGOs like Promundo to create these, reports, we did one in 2019 called "The State of the World's Fathers." Really, it's focused on developing nations. It's focused on developed nations and achieving gender equity, because it's really an issue that first can help the women in our world not be so burdened by childcare, and help them so that they don't have to make as many sacrifices to their careers. And so there's an argument about this that is, it is good for business. It is good for the workforce in both developing and developed worlds that women are back to work, and maybe the burden is shared out a little bit as opposed to wholeheartedly fitting to her. In some markets, that multiplier of how much time she spends on childcare versus him can be upwards of 5 and sometimes 10x. So in the UK and the US, it's a bit better. It's maybe she spends twice as much time on childcare. In Southeast Asia, we see countries where she spends 10 times more time in childcare than him. And I think the more that we can get to gender equity, the better for business it would be, the better for her it would be. And that's before you even start unfurling what are the benefits for the children, what are the benefits for the guys and the fathers that take the child leave. When you look at the children, you're looking at young girls who feel more empowered, who don't understand from the get-go that, business is more important to him than it is to mom. You have young men or young boys that understand what gender equity is from the onset. And then you get to the guys and the fathers that take the time, and you have fathers that feel more fulfilled. They have better physical, mental health. They have better sex lives. They're better creativity. There's a lot of things that as an individual you can yield from it as well. So I feel across the scope, the first thing that you might notice that, yes, it's for her, it's for gender equity. The second thing you may notice that it's for our children. It's for creating a better environment for them to carry the torch forward. And then lastly, it's for the father himself to develop that bond early on with the child. And all of this could create this hum of betterment that then leads to better business and doesn't take people out the workforce so long.
So if someone's listening to this podcast and they are expecting a child or planning a family, and they know full well that their business doesn't provide any particular paternity leave or anything above what is legally required, how would you go about changing that policy at an existing employer?
So it really does depend on which nation you're in. And it's funny that you mentioned legally required, because in certain nations, to your point, there is like true mandates on like use it or lose it policies, that whether it's shared amongst the mom and the dad, or it's just defined as maternity leave or defined as paternity leave in the local policy in that nation, this recommendation can vary for sure. In the US, for example, we have no national policy. We leave it up to the states to provide some services, and at times it's kind of a slap in the face. So there'll be like short-term disability offered to the mom. I mean, it's a major medical event. For some women, the most major medical event that they ever go through, and to think that they have to rely on a state short-term medical leave, it's not even defined as maternity leave, is sad. And we leave it up largely to the corporation. And I think in the US, that's why this becomes a little bit of a class issue as well, because you have a lot of blue collar, hourly wage workers that really can't imagine taking a time away from their role, their job at a factory or whatever it may be. And then you have white collar workers who work for these corporations that are offering this program. And so we have this huge discrepancy in the United States because we leave it up to the corporation. So if I'm a marketer, or if I'm someone who's at the board table, who has influence over this program, I would look to the data, because the data suggests that the people that take paternity leave, the people that are offered these types of benefits, they show more durability and resilience through the tough times of their job. The retention is especially important, because if you find someone that's dedicated to your corporation because of the benefits that you offer, you don't need to be as competitive on salary, and I think that's certainly something that HR programs and corporations are understanding. But secondly, you don't have to replace people as much. You don't have as much attrition. It's very costly to replace someone. It varies by what they do, but you're looking at sometimes $25,000 to $50,000 to bring on someone new, to hire recruiters, get someone new, bring them on and train them for a job. If you can avoid that attrition and build that trust and build that retention, there's certainly value in that I think is overlooked on a lot of occasions in the boardroom.
Riley, unfortunately, we've come to the end of the podcast now. I would love to keep on talking about this, but we have to call it a day. If someone wanted to talk to you about your work and about these beliefs about paternity leave or anything else we've discussed, how would you like listeners to get in touch with you?
Sure. Yeah. So I can be reached at Riley1Dunn. That's RILEY, the number 1 DUNN, across all platforms. That's at Gmail. That's on Instagram. That's at Twitter, Clubhouse, TikTok. Find me. I'm all over. So I really appreciate the time. Happy to be here, and excited to see where we take this as marketeers and shifting culture.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Hi, just before you go, I'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to write a review of the Shiny New Object podcast on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, whatever it's called these days, or whichever podcast provider you use. We're an indie podcast, so it would go a long way for us if you could just share the word and give us a bit of a support on those channels. That would just be fantastic. If you haven't got time, that's also cool. And yeah, if you could tell your colleagues about the podcast, and also, if possible, don't forget to subscribe. And I'd love to hear your feedback. If you'd like to speak on the podcast or be a guest, or you think I'm asking the wrong questions, anything, I'd be super interested to hear what you think. So please email me at tom@automatedcreative.net. That's TOM at, I'm not going to bother spelling it. Anyway, you'll work it out. Thanks so much.